Thank you for joining us. This is Mid-State Money Talk. On the desk today, we have Al Dietrich and we have Joe Dietrich, father and son team here. We're going to be talking about, wow, what an amazing topic, generational wealth. That's why it's great we've got a generation here between us. And is this something that you like to talk about with the sons even before coming into the practice of how can you help keep your legacy together, maybe pass it on to a next generation?
Yes, that's pretty much been in the back of my mind my entire life. Didn't think it was going to happen, but it did. And so, yes, keeping the practice going and keeping, my life of work moving forward is very important to me, and I know it's important to my sons too. The work we do for clients is it's just amazing. The appreciation we get inside and from them is just an amazing situation.
Right. On today's program, we're going to talk about a concept known as generational wealth. There's a few different places where your money can go in retirement, and hopefully some of it is on vacations and the kids and the grandkids and leading a lifestyle. But there's a few other warning areas that both Al and Joe want to talk about today. But generational wealth, it doesn't necessarily have to be Rockefeller kind of money, Joe, but passing on some sort of legacy to our next generation, there's a few steps you've got to take properly, right?
Absolutely. And they're mostly practical steps. Obviously, as we are getting up there, we're accumulating this big estate, we have stuff, right? Where does that stuff go? Where do we want that stuff to go? Who do we want making decisions for our assets, for our health care? These are all kind of practical things that are going to be really important as you age. And taking the time to come in and meet with us, sit down and walk through this process, really learn how to insulate your assets, learn how to set up some parameters, and so what you wish to happen is going to happen. And that's really what it's about. It doesn't really matter the amount of assets. We all have stuff. The estate plan, the generational wealth plan, this may look different depending upon those things. Some might be a little more complicated than others, but they're all important regardless of the amount of stuff that we have.
Joe, thank you for saying that. Al, I wanted to ask you that, starting out kind of as a baseline, because you've done this for decades. Is there like an amount threshold when you feel that a family needs to start doing estate planning, or is it more about the complexity of the family itself, or do you have several properties and 6 different kids and how do you determine if somebody really needs to dig in and start doing estate planning?
Well, an estate plan is simply a way to insulate your assets. The more complex the situation is with the family or a business, the more complex the estate plan. And so what I feel is when folks come in there's all these different lifestyles that we have, previous marriages, children, previous businesses, business partners, those type of things. That can complicate things. And part of our 5-step process that we really promote is making sure that your assets go where you want them to go. Because, if you have, let's say, 2 children, you really have 3 beneficiaries.
Wait, what do you mean? You said 2 children. Why do I have 3?
Well, you have 3 beneficiaries because the IRS is going to get their part first. And your 2 children only get to share what's left. So in the estate plan, you can really control a lot of that. And another thing about the estate plan is a lot of times we have children, but some can handle money well, some not so well.
Yes.
And so it gives you an opportunity to not only make sure that your funds are going where they're supposed to go, but that they're going to benefit that individual regardless of how their lifestyle is at that moment.
Yeah, and whether they are, say, good handling those finances or not, it also is a little bit more helpful to say, well, I'm just going to dump this large amount of money in your lap. Now you're going to be responsible for some tax implications that you may not be prepared for. We're looking at people that we're meeting with in their 50s and their 60s. This is top of mind quite a bit, right? Somebody's in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. They might not be thinking about all this. They're going to be getting education really quick.
Right.
Yeah.
And this concept of estate planning, you've said before as well, as soon as we bring that up, some people start to think, oh, we're going to pile in all of these different kinds of trusts and it's going to get really complicated. It doesn't necessarily have to have all of those tools, or certainly not several of them. There's some basics, there's some things to review, but does everybody need a trust?
Not at all, no.
Okay.
Part of the estate planning process has to do with either a will or trusts or multiple of thereof. But, you know, the other part of it is, you know, ancillary documents like power of attorneys, power of attorneys for healthcare, power of attorneys for assets, DNRs. All of those things are extremely important. If you don't have something set up, I have a story I can share with you about that. Yeah, husband and wife came in. They were with me for about 12 years. He was in an auto accident. They didn't have a will. They didn't have power of attorneys. And he was in a coma. He had been in a coma for over a year. And so now, all of a sudden, she had no choice. She had to sell the house. She couldn't sell the house. It was in both names. She had to go to the courts and petition them for the right to sell her own home. That took 3 months. By the time she was actually eligible to sell or able to sell that home, the price had really going down because now it's a must sale. And so, you know, those ancillary documents are extremely important.
And what about also today, Joe, the digital era? I mean, maybe one person in the household is in charge of paying the bills or, you know, taking care of the credit cards and so forth. I mean, little stuff like this,
Yes.
there are accounts you can't get into if you don't have the permissions from your spouse.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to have all of that set up in ahead of time, and it makes everything so much easier. And it's also one of the reasons why we really encourage our clients to come in together. The planning process is together, both regardless if Mr. or Mrs. is the primary account document holder, paid all the bills, does all those decisions. Both parties need to be there because this is a shared plan, a shared goal, and it's going to impact, you know, your wife or your husband, your spouse at some point.
Right. We always like to give out at least some simple tips right here. One of the things you told me about before we started today's show was just looking at beneficiary designations. You're surprised sometimes how much people haven't filled out. Does it still hold true?
Oh, yes. You know, we have people come in all the time. It's their second marriage. And his first wife is still on the 401k. And that's not going to go well, you know. And so
not at all.
That comes to the forefront. We want to get that taken care of almost immediately. And so we have them bring in their accounts, their life insurance policies, their annuities, their 401ks. We want to know who was on there. And almost every time we have to restructure something there.
Yep.
Right.
Simple as a name change. We got married, never changed our name.
Oh, wow.
Or we decided we filled out the application wrong and we got a hyphenated last name and it hasn't been corrected. Just simple things like that can really throw a monkey wrench in at a time in which, you know, your family, your loved ones, they're already under a lot of stress and grieving.
Right.
Let me add something to that.
Yes, please.
Just had a client in, and we had to do a name change on her 401k, an old 401k, before we could move it. So if that would have been delayed, who knows what effect that would have had. So that happens all the time. We have to do a name change before something can be transitioned.
Right, right. We'll be right back after this. Folks, building generational wealth. You don't know what you don't know. Work with a team who looks at these kinds of documents, these planning strategies, every single day in their offices. This is what First Choice Financial is actually dedicated to, helping you through all of those retirement stages. Sure, today we're talking about generational wealth, but the holistic planning includes your investments, how much risk you're taking, taxes, how and when to take your Social Security, and estate planning. What is your estate? It's very simple. Do you have stuff that you want to leave to someone? Then you need to do your estate planning. Call the phone number down at the bottom of the screen. We have folks standing by at our secure call center right now to schedule your appointment with the team. In fact, as soon as we come back, I'm going to have Al explain a little bit about what actually the process is like. More Mid-State Money Talk right after this.
How I got in the world of finance? My brother-in-law had a friend that was in the business, and he was looking to find an agent, and I was looking for a job. I was really hesitant, almost didn't do it. But then I thought, you know, I gotta have a job while I'm looking for a future, you know, and so that's why I took it. And then one day I was asked to deliver a death claim check to a family. This was a very emotional situation, and my son was there watching this whole thing. So as I sat down and went over the amount of the money and how it should be spent, oh, she was just up and hugging me and thanking me. And at that point in time, it hit me that what I'm doing is really important. It's not just being in the life insurance business. And so it was just a few months till I was independent. Yeah, I couldn't do what I wanted to do as a captive agent. As an independent, it allowed me to be flexible with my time. And now the blessing is that Kevin, that young man I was talking about, he is now joining me in my practice. And his brother, Joe is joining me in the practice. So the future of First Choice Financial Services is in great hands.
Welcome back to Mid-State Money Talk. On the desk today is Al Dietrich and Joe Dietrich, father-son planners here with First Choice Financial Services. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is generational wealth. How do you build it? It's not just about having Carnegie and Rockefeller money. Sometimes just, a little bit of a lump sum left for the kids or grandkids can make a huge difference in their lives. But I did promise our viewers right before we went to break. Over the last few months, folks have been kind of writing in and said, what is it like? I don't want to be sold. I don't want to be pitched. Your firm, Al, somebody calls that phone number. What's it going to be like when they come in the first time?
When they walk through the door, they're greeted. Where we try to make them feel as comfortable as possible. Make sure they're taken care of. They offer drinks and so on. Just make them feel at home. And we usually have a television on with some highlights of things that we have said and done. And by the time they come back, they bring a packet of information that we mailed out to them. If it isn't complete, they have some time when they get there to finish that out. But we just start right on with trying to find out, a little about them, where they're from, where did they go to school, what did they like, how did they meet, where, and where are they now, and so what's their family consist of, what are the things that you enjoy doing as a family, how active are you, you got 3 kids, you need 3 chauffeurs,
Yeah.
And so we just want to get to know them. And then we start talking about, the 5 steps that we discuss. And we look across their paperwork and make sure that things are accurate. At that point in time is when, we usually bring up in the 5th step about generational wealth. It's, where, not only where do you have your money, but, who are the beneficiaries on those statements? How often do you look at them? How often have you changed your 401k? Do you have somebody to talk to about that? Were you married before? How much of...
Any skeletons in the closet, we need to know about it.
That's
That's
exactly right. Mr. Jones has 3 kids, 3 sons to his first wife, and Mrs. Jones has 3 sons to her first husband. So Mr. Jones, when you pass away, is there any part of your assets that you want to actually leave to them, and how much of your assets do you want to leave to your wife? Do you want to leave it all to your wife? And that's extremely important. And then we go into, what's the process of doing that? Now, we're not attorneys, and we don't want anybody to believe we are, but we try to prepare some groundwork so that when they do take that next step, they're not walking into an attorney's office blind. They're walking in there, they have the answers in front of them that the attorneys are going to ask, and they can develop a great relationship with the attorney groups that we work with. We've been working with them for 20 plus years.
Right.
Have
Excellent.
Tremendous confidence in those folks.
So, and just real quick, as you said, in that 5-step process, number 5, usually we get to how do we want to build generational wealth, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
Those other 4 elements, because I usually say it on commercials, so it's investments and risk.
Yes.
Taxes.
Taxes.
How and when to take Social Security, and what health choices?
Healthcare.
Okay.
Yes. Those are the 5 basics, and each one obviously goes into a lot of areas. But one of the things that we do discuss from our point of view on estate planning is, when you do determine how many dollars you have to give to Uncle Sam, you want to pay 100 cents on the dollar, or do you want to look at a strategy where you can pay a fraction of that and have someone else involved in paying those taxes for you?
Right. Joe, when it comes to the estate planning, that generational wealth, how many times do we hear in the headline somebody passing away having no plans whatsoever?
That's right. Yeah. Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, Abraham Lincoln. all of them died without a will.
His term was cut a little bit short. I don't think he was ready to play.
A little unexpected, but that's life. It's unexpected.
Right.
Sometimes our life is cut short tragically, but we want to prepare for that. We can prepare for that now.
Right.
Yep. All of these. So
and things like the Presley estate continue to be in the news. There was some shyster who just tried to get the granddaughter on the estate, saying that when mom passed away, there was a loan, and he filed it with the court and tried to shut down the entire estate. Now, luckily, she got the paperwork, was able to go into the court and say, I've never even heard of this, but that's someone so well known as the Presley estate. If you don't have your assets protected, can we talk a little bit about probate? I'm not against the public in paying your debts, but probate is a public process, isn't it, Al?
Yes. Most of the things that go through your estate, your will, through your estate, it's going to be a public knowledge. You can go to the courthouse and you can look a lot of that up. But when you enter into a will or a trust, most times that's privatized.
Okay.
Yeah, so like you said, you're aware of what's happening with the Presley estate. Do we want everybody else in our community around the world to be aware of what's going on in our estate? And if there's ways that we can somehow protect that from being an open book while it's in the courts, then why don't we go ahead and do that? Obviously we also have attorney's fees that are going to be involved. You're going to have a process of time in which to be able to execute these things. So, who gets what comes down to where can we establish things that go directly to the beneficiaries we want, and how do we protect those things that have to go through probate from the public
eye? Yeah. Certain mistakes maybe you've seen. Maybe you can help uncover some things. I was talking with somebody at a live event recently, and they said, I was thinking about, it's just me, my husband passed away, I'm thinking about putting my daughter and listing her on my home, because that's where I know, it's going to go to. Do you think we'd be avoiding taxes? Do you think this is a good idea? Listing children on your assets, thumbs up or thumbs down in your guys' opinion?
We're not attorneys.
And you're not attorneys. You're not attorneys.
There's implications both ways, is really the bottom line. And you really should have an attorney that talks to you, talks you through that. But consider this, if you put your child on your asset, they're now 50% owner of their asset. There's some tax implications to that, but also perhaps your son or daughter predeceases you. Now all of a sudden it's reversed, and you've got probate and part of an asset coming to you in which you just gifted away. There's some implications for doing this that is not quite as simple as somebody might think, and we want to kind of walk through those implications and then can make an intelligent decision.
Right. And then when you have today's society, there's so much traffic on the highways today, and people lose their lives. They just don't make it home. And if someone gets sued and they're on your deed with you, what happens? That's now a viable asset for them. But you have to understand, you're going to pay the piper one way or the other. You're going to pay it through an inheritance or income, or there's going to be some form of payment you're going to have to make. And that's where the attorneys come into play. And they can guide you and direct you into those areas so you can make good choices.
Okay. We want to make some good choices as well. We've got a very short message about you guys and the firm here, so don't go anywhere. But you can get started on your own complete portfolio review. When we get back from this message, in about 60 seconds here, we're going to talk about some to-dos that you can start doing right now to help build your own generational wealth. How do we make sure we insulate our assets and pass it to the next generation? And if you want to sit down with that appointment that Alan just talked about, it's so simple. You call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen. It'll go over to our secure call center. They'll set up an appointment for you. Another easy way, because I know you're all sitting there with your smartphones, open up your phone to the camera function and point it at this QR code, and then you click on it. It'll take you over to their website. You can schedule your own appointment right there. You can literally do that right now during this message. More Midstate Money Talk right after this.
Getting into the financial space has been kind of a lifelong calling. I'm second generation in this business. My father started the business in 1979. And so I grew up and throughout my whole life has kind of been in touch with that. For about 20 years, I spent some time in the commercial P&C space. Walked a lot of people through some really difficult times through their life, and I enjoyed the work, but it wasn't a calling, and I always wanted to get back here. And the opportunity presented itself and you get to the point where waking up energized to do some good work every day is what I was really looking for, and after 20 years in that space, I was ready to move on, and I really enjoy interacting with our clients, and I really enjoy seeing the impact that we make on their lives. And we want them to feel that, you don't ever hesitate to pick up the phone and call your family, and I think that's where we want to be with our clients. We're there to help educate, we're help walk them through their retirement years and their planning process.
Welcome back to Mid-State Money Talk with Al Dietrich and Joe Dietrich of First Choice Financial Services. I'm your host, Mike Spangle, and today we're talking about estate planning and more so generational wealth. How do we make sure we pass it on? A few tips we've already given throughout the show. Please review your beneficiary designations if you haven't done that in a while. Make sure that you have all of those legal forms, things like DNR, your legal financial power of attorney, and also your health power of attorney.
That's right.
Now, the thing is, don't we often give that to our spouse? What happens if the spouse predeceases? Which of the children do you have to choose, Al, when you give those documents onto a next generation?
That is a good question you can ask to an attorney. Our experience has been, our children have different bents. Some of my children are very good with finances, and then I have a daughter, and she's very good with being a mother, taking care of kids, and she knows a lot about healthcare, just like her mother. So for us, it was an easy decision. Now,
right.
You obviously would like to name your spouse first, but if they refuse or are incapable of doing it, you would want to have a secondary individual listed on there, and sometimes a third and a fourth. But you just never know who's going to survive you.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to do those things.
Yeah, it could be set up as a sequence or a group type or that can fill those roles for you.
Right.
But that's something you want to think about and really rely on those that you can trust in those particular areas.
We discussed this one time in one of our pre-show meetings, that there's only a few places eventually your money can go in your retirement. Hopefully some of it you're enjoying it, right? Yep. Some of it's going to go to food and lifestyle, but there's a few other places that we don't necessarily want it to go. That's taxes, that's those healthcare costs. In fact, something amazing you said to me, what happens the last couple years of our life with a lot of that savings, Al?
Yeah. I was in a workshop and a doctor was attending, and he said, "May I make a comment?" I said, "Sure. If doctor wants to talk, let him talk, right?" And he said, "Something that we have discovered is that most people go through the majority of their assets in the last 2 years of their life. The last 2 years of their life, and so that's amazing to me, and it should be amazing to you too at home, because that's where healthcare really comes into play. We always say healthcare is probably going to be the biggest expense that you may have. So I saw a figure one time that said, healthcare for a couple should be set up at around $300,000 or more. So
for their lifetime.
For their lifetime and retirement, that's the
right.
couple, and that's things like Medicare and your costs and your co-pays.
Yeah,
but then there's all the other stuff that it doesn't cover.
Long-term care, $8,000 to $10,000 a month. If you're in there 18 months, that's a substantial amount of money. And that's a short-term stay. That's an average short-term stay there. So, but yes, and the other thing about it is the second largest cost that you can expect is taxes. Yeah, and I think inflation comes right in there with that.
Right.
So those are three things that are really, somewhat out of your control.
You really bummed me out earlier in the show. And you said, so let's say I've got $1 million 401k account and things rolled over into there, and I've got 2 kids. You said, well, you've got 3 heirs. Like,
right.
What? You said, the first, you're going to have to pay Uncle Sam, and then your kids get to split.
So suppose Uncle Sam gets 45% of that account. I even got 2 children splitting $500,000 or so, of which they have to pay taxes out of. So that $1 million estate just doesn't go as far as it used to.
Right. To add on to that then, because I want to ask Joe here about tools that we now use. we used to talk a lot about long-term care policies, individual 15, 20 years ago. And I think a lot of that has faded away, as we've discussed about today's modern retiree. But are there tools that can help insulate our savings and maximize our long-term care spend? Are there things out there that can help us insulate that?
Absolutely. We talked a lot about investments having characteristics meant to solve a problem. And of people that are currently 65 years of age or older, 70% are going to need long-term care of some sort. That's a large majority.
Yeah, we're not at 100%, but 70%. That's 3 out of 4 of us.
Absolutely. So there's the idea of self-funding, the idea of alternate products such as annuities or life insurance products that provide an additional benefit that is really allocated to the long-term care expense. It's really about making sure that each dollar has a purpose. It has a job. And so some of that is going to be for the short term, some of it's going to be for the long term. We want to be able to protect certain assets and allocate them to be able to meet a need that we may or may not need, but 70%, that's a pretty good possibility. And so it would be foolish not to take some time, sit down, and plan for that.
One avenue, I think, I don't know, it might not be as fun for folks to think about, life insurance as an estate planning tool, because we know that passes on tax-free to our heirs, but it's not something that necessarily we get to enjoy. Is this an aspect of conversation? Do we actually want to talk about this even later in life and making sure that we've got enough of something that we can do? Hey, let's pay off the mortgage with this, as opposed to another show we talked about, the being debt-free in retirement. Maybe if there's more mortgage left over, we could pay it off with life insurance.
Well, yeah, mortgage, taxes, there's a lot of things that life insurance is used for. It's an estate planning tool. When we first start off a family, we have an estate. In other words, you fund it with life insurance until you've had time to accumulate an estate, right? But now we're on the other end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is, okay, so now if I know the value of my estate, if I know there's going to be a certain amount of taxes that need to be paid, does it make sense to fund a life insurance plan that is designed to do just that? Also, like you said, if there's unpaid debt, why pay off the balance? I just saw a couple the other day. They just bought a $765,000 house, $4,200 a month in payments. Okay, that's huge. Somebody needs to pay that off and not take it out of their investments.
Yeah. Al and Joe, both thank you talking about generational wealth on today's program. We want to let you know that it's only one aspect of what the firm looks at. Your investments, your risk, your taxes, of course, the estate planning, healthcare choices. How do we insulate this? So not only is it there for you, but maybe for your next generation as well. Call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen so you can get started today. It's no cost to you. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.